Exactly 2 weeks to go until Election Day. President Trump and Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden are facing a major change when it comes to the format of Thursday night's final debate. Yesterday, the Commission on Presidential Debates announced it would mute the candidates' mics when their opponent is answering a question for his allotted 2 minutes. Both microphones will turn on again once the discussion portions begin. The commission says the move is meant to help keep this debate more civil than the last. For more on this, let's bring in Paula Reid at the White House, and Ed O'Keefe joins us from Washington. So, Paula, how is the Trump campaign responding to these changes? Any indication that the president might refuse to participate?
It's certainly possible, but moments ago in an interview with Fox News, the president said that he will participate, but he's criticizing the whole thing as crazy. He has repeatedly accused the debate commission of trying to bolster his opponent, former Vice President Joe Biden. He has called these changes, these last-minute changes, unfair, and he has repeatedly attacked the moderator, Kristen Welker. He mentioned her probably half a dozen times in that Fox News interview, calling her impartial. I work alongside her at the White House. She's a fantastic journalist, and while she's tough on the president, she's certainly always fair. Now, in a statement, the campaign also complained about these changes, denouncing, quote, granting an unnamed person the ability to shut off a candidate's microphone. Again, they're complaining that this is not fair, specifically to the president, but the moderator will still be responsible for ensuring that each candidate has roughly the same amount of time to give their answers to the questions from Kristen Welker.
Yeah, you know, I worked with Kristen as well here in Philly. We both worked in Philly. Always an excellent journalist, but also tough. And maybe, I don't know, maybe that's what they're a little scared of, because she's not a pushover. So, Ed, let me ask you, the moderator, Kristen, talked about the debate topics that are going to be covered. They included foreign policy, climate change, the pandemic. Trump campaign manager Bill Stepien then sent a letter to the Commission on Presidential Debates ahead of Thursday's event, citing some concerns. So what was in that letter, and what is the campaign hoping to achieve?
Right. Well, look, in years past, there has often been at least one debate devoted to primarily foreign policy and national security. This time, there is not going to be one of those. The president would like to have one focused on those two issues because it will allow him to talk about things like China, Ukraine, the recent Israeli, United Arab Emirates, Bahraini peace deals, and other work that he's done overseas, instead of questions about race in America, leadership, the pandemic, the economy, topics on which he is struggling to find support across the country, at least majority support. So they sent this letter saying, look, please recalibrate the debate to focus only on foreign policy. Our understanding was that's what it was going to be about. The Biden campaign turns around and says, no, months ago we agreed with you, Trump campaign, that the moderator would choose the subjects. And the reason that the president is raising objections to this now is he doesn't want to face questions again about his handling of the pandemic. Anytime the focus is on the pandemic, the president is in a defensive and probably losing position. Anytime he can try to talk about other things, they believe he's in a stronger position. So we'll see. And he will be there. He said it again this morning, as Paula said, with about 73 million people who tuned into the last one, the president understands. Amid those 73 million, there are probably a few million still, believe it or not, who are undecided. And when you look at polling in places like Ohio, North Carolina, Arizona, Florida, where it's still tick-tock tight between the two of them, you could sway a few 100,000 people in either direction, and you could swing the entire election. So this debate still has a huge potential to swing the election either way.
Yeah, and Paula, just so everybody understands, the topics that Kristen is going to focus on include fighting COVID-19, American families, race in America, climate change, national security, and leadership. All of the subjects that for people who are undecided going into November 3rd would probably want to know about. And the change that the commission is making, Paula, correct me if I'm wrong, is only for the 2 minutes when the other side is speaking, which is something both campaigns have agreed to.
That's right. It's not like they're going to be constantly cutting off microphones no matter when they're speaking. That certainly obviously would be a concern for the moderator. You don't want to be accused of trying to cut particularly the president off mid-answer or in any way suppress anyone's ability to speak out. This seems aimed at preventing what we saw last time, which was a very chaotic event where it was really hard for anyone to get information. But there are certainly voters, there are certainly viewers, and the feedback that I've seen has been some viewers are like, why is anyone trying to censor what I hear? If they want to continue to interrupt each other, I guess that's their message to America, and perhaps we shouldn't be helping them stop that.
You know, Ed, you mentioned that in some states it's still very, very tight between the two candidates. Over the weekend, CBS News obtained an internal Biden campaign memo showing the campaign's focus on state polling, particularly in many of those tight races, those key battleground states. What more can you tell us about the strategy that the former vice president's campaign is going to be focusing on in the next 2 weeks? At
this point, it's turning out every single warm-blooded, conscious human being who wants to vote for them in this country and getting them to the polls, whether it's early, whether it's with a write-in ballot, or whether it's on Election Day. They understand that this is a contest that is won state by state. They only look at state-by-state surveys right now. They see what we're seeing at CBS. Single-digit advantages in the places where it's going to matter the most. Pennsylvania, Florida, North Carolina, Arizona, Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, maybe Iowa, maybe even Texas. That's why they have to turn out as many people as they can find, and they got to keep them motivated. At this point, viewer's guide here, don't look at those national horse race head-to-head matchups. That is not how we elect a president in this country. Just because Joe Biden may have a double-digit lead nationally means nothing on Election Day and in presidential elections. We hold 51 separate contests and figure out at the end who has the most electoral college votes. That's how the Biden campaign's looking at it. That's how we look at it at CBS, and it continues to show this thing could still swing in many different directions.
Paula, let me ask you about a Supreme Court ruling that is going to allow Pennsylvania to count mail-in ballots received up to 3 days after the November 3rd election. Republicans, including the president's campaign, have opposed the move. Why are they against the extension? I mean, I have a guess, but what does the decision mean for the president's campaign?
Well, let's look at the history in Pennsylvania. Prior to this year, your ballot had to arrive by Election Day to be counted. But Democrats in the state challenged that this year in anticipation of millions of voters across the country who are likely going to be doing mail-in ballots because of the pandemic. Now, Republicans have opposed this. Their argument was essentially that this is something that should be up to the state legislature. Now, the state Supreme Court sided with Democrats, and the United States Supreme Court declined to hear the case, so that lower ruling stands. But it's very significant because you have to remember that in 2016, President Trump only won the state of Pennsylvania by about 44,000 votes. And this question of how long you have to get your ballot in before it won't be counted has been a topic of litigation in states across the country. Again, it's an unusual time that we find ourselves in right now. Lots more people availing themselves. But here in Pennsylvania, even if this makes the difference for just a few tens of thousands of votes, that could make the difference for that critical state. And as Ed noted, every state counts, particularly with the Electoral College.
Paula, the president had a rally in Arizona. He said a bunch of things, including that people are, his words, pandemicked out. And of course, what Vlad talked about at the top of the show, he called Dr. Fauci a disaster. You got to wonder, you know, Dr. Fauci is still probably clearly one of the most respected sort of experts in this area, but kind of probably one of the more respected Americans at this point. Why choose to attack him now?
Well, certainly I cannot speak to the strategy, if there is one, or the logic of attacking someone who the majority of Americans respect and listen to. But if you listen to the president's attacks yesterday, it was that rally, it was a campaign call on Twitter, across the board. About 13 million Americans are unemployed as a result of this pandemic. Hundreds or thousands are dead. 8 million have fallen below the poverty line. The president was really focused yesterday, almost more so than his opponent, on attacking Dr. Fauci. And to your question of why would he do this, it's just unclear. Through his comments, it appeared that perhaps jealousy or frustration was getting the best of him. He did complain about how often Dr. Fauci is on TV. He repeatedly referenced how many people like him, listen to him, trust him, and he would even say himself, he would say, well, I think he's a nice guy, but then he would mock his first pitch that he threw out here at the Nationals game. So it doesn't appear that there's any strategy. It does not make any sense to be hammering a scientist when, if you look at the polls, people overwhelmingly do not think that this administration has done a good job of handling this pandemic. But we've seen this before when the president, ego, frustration, pet peeves get the best of him. He cannot stay on message. And in the long run, it's just unclear how on earth this would help him win those key states.
It is fascinating, Paula, and I'm looking at some of the president's tweets from a couple of hours ago, yesterday, where he says, it keeps reminding me that Tony, meaning Dr. Fauci, threw out perhaps the worst first pitch in the history of baseball. This is the president of the United States attacking somebody whose job is not to throw baseballs on a baseball diamond, whose job it is to save lives, and a job that he has done admirably for several presidents, both Republican and Democrats, over the years. And the reason he's still there, as the president continues to mock him for being there for so long, is because he's very, very good at his job. So it is just very small of the president to do something like this. And so, Ed, the question is, how are the Biden folks responding to this? I mean, are they going on the offensive? Is this an opportunity for them to highlight some of the differences between the president's approach to science, research, and medicine vis-a-vis the president?
Yeah, it's exactly that. They just want to provide yet another sharp contrast with the president when it comes to pandemic management. They win this contest, they win the argument, they win the day, they may win the White House when the focus is on the pandemic and how they believe the president has handled it. And so if the president wants to be picking a fight with Anthony Fauci, who, as Paula points out, is one of the most respected, trusted Americans right now, their argument is go right ahead, because it only helps them in the long run, and they are more than happy to stand with him. And remember, Biden has vowed to as president, if he wins, to essentially literally welcome Fauci back into the Oval Office, to consult with him on a regular basis and other doctors and scientists about what exactly needs to be done to end the pandemic as quickly as possible. And so they're more than happy to see this going on.
All right, Ed, Paula, thank you so much, guys.